Shalom everyone and welcome to MaShaH, which is Barak in Hebrew. My name is Abigail. We're continuing on the series entitled Appointed Times of YaHuaH, and in particular we are looking at the timing as in when exactly are we to observe the appointed times of YaHuaH, and the importance of looking at when is that so that we can align it in terms of the Gregorian calendars that we are using, and also with the understanding from the previous teachings that we've had that the seasons happen in different times between the northern hemisphere as well as the southern hemisphere. And then we who are in the southern hemisphere, when are we to observe the appointed times of YaHuaH? And in the previous teaching we also highlighted the fact that the appointed times of YaHuaH must be observed according to the promised land, according to where YaSHaRAL is. And that's why I've been making reference to this book, which is entitled True YaSHaRAL, the land and the people, because we have come to understand from what Yahusha meant when he said in Revelation chapter 2 verse 2, as well as Revelation chapter 3, what Yahusha said in Revelation 2 verse 9, and he also repeated it again in Revelation 3 verse 9. So it's Revelation 2 verse 9 as well as Revelation 3 verse 9, where he said there are those who call themselves Jews but they are not, and in fact they are liars. They are a synagogue of Satan. I will cause them to come and bow down before you, and that they know that you are mine. I have chosen you. So in the previous teaching we've been looking at, so when he says that they are liars, those that call themselves Jews, and that they are not Jews, they're in fact a synagogue of Satan, who are those? And then when he also speaks in Revelation 3 verse 9, when he says that I will make them know that you are mine. So who is the you are mine that is referring to? That the liars will bow down and acknowledge that I have loved you. This is what led to this book and all the scriptural references that came as a result of that truth that was revealed not only to me but to many of our brothers and sisters have gotten to know the truth, that if those people lied about their identity, calling themselves Jews and they are not, they actually did not only lie about their identity, but they also lied about the land where they are at, that's not YaSHaRAL, that's not the land of YaSHaRAL. So with that understanding, there's a huge paradigm shift that in now us walking and obeying Yahuwah's commandment as well as his appointed time, then all that needed to change to say, okay, even the appointed times we're following according to the northern hemisphere. Now that we know that the promised land is not in the northern hemisphere, it's in the southern hemisphere. So when are we, according to the seasons and the times in the northern hemisphere, are we to observe the appointed times of YaHuaH? So in today's teaching, we're going to be looking at what is the role. Remember that also in the previous teaching we spoke about Bereshit or Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, that we're told that YaHuaH created lights, and these lights were for appointed times, were for signs, were for years, were for days. So which one is used for appointed time? Which of these signs and which of these lights? And these lights refers to the moon, the sun, as well as the stars. So which of these lights is used for the appointed times? Which one is used for for the years? And this is what we're going to be looking at then in today's teaching. And what we see is that there is a difference between the beginning of the new moons as well as the beginning of the new year. A lot of people think that because of how we grew up in this in the system where we are following the Gregorian calendar, that the beginning of the new month, according to the Gregorian calendar, is January, it automatically becomes the beginning of the year. But according to YaHuaH, that's not the case. There is a difference between the beginning of the new moons, or the beginning of the new months, or the beginning of months, as well as the beginning of the year. And then when the beginning of the new moons or the beginning of the new months happen at a different time as to when the beginning of the new happens, what then happens to align the two? Because it does happen, and there is an alignment that needs to be done. We'll also look at the scripture as to what happens to align the two. And then the beginning of the new moons, it's very easy then to say of the lights, whether sun, moon, or stars, which of the lights is YaHuaH uses to mark the beginning of the new moons. By what I've just said, literally, it then is the moon is one of the lights, or is the light that YaHuaH uses to mark the new moons. And then the sun is then used, YaHuaH uses the sun to mark the new year. So the sun is used for the year, marking the year, and then the moon is used for marking the new moons. This is what we will be looking at from scriptural reference and the information that is available out there. So starting with marking the beginning of the month, or on the beginning of the new moon, remember in last week's teaching, we saw that the month and the moon are actually used interchangeably. The moon refers to the month, and the month refers to the moon. And we saw that in the book of Sirach, chapter 43, verse 6 to 8. So Sirach, otherwise known as Ecclesiasticus, this is one of the books that we removed from the Bibles that we have, but it was originally there in the 1611 King James Version. It's also still there in the Septuagint and other versions like the CEPHER and other scriptural canons. You can actually Google this particular book, and if you just go on Google and put in Sirach chapter 43, verse 6 to 8, we'll be reading the same verses. I'm reading from CEPHER, and then it says, "He made the moon also to serve in her seasons for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is the sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection, a light in a perfection. The month is called after her name." So the month is called after her name, which refers to the moon, because it is the moon that serves for a declaration of times, as well as the sign of the world, as well as the sign for the feast or the appointed times. And then the verse continues then to tell us that the month is called by her name. So hence I'm saying that the moon, the month, used interchangeably, and the moon is used to declare the appointed times, is used for signs of the world, as well as sign of the feast, meaning the appointed times. We also saw it in the book of Psalms 104 verse 19. Psalms 104 verse 19, it read, "He made the moon for appointed times." So YaHuaH made the moon for appointed times. Now we know that the moon is used for appointed times. So then, if the moon is used for the appointed times, how do we know that it is now the beginning of the new moon, or the beginning of the month? We see this, that when you look up in the sky, you will see a sliver moon. A sliver moon, it's like the shape, my daughter called it a smiley face, but it's like that. It's like a banana kind of like shape like this. You can actually Google it, and just when you on Google just put in sliver moon, you will see that it's the slice of the very thin slice of the moon that you see in the sky. When you see that, that is the beginning of the moon. Scripturally, where is that mentioned? We find that in the book of CHaNuK, otherwise known as Enoch. Again, Enoch is one of the books that were removed from the Bible or the canon that we're using, but you can access it. Other versions like CEPHER still has Enoch, and you can actually also Google it and find it on the internet, the book of Enoch. And then, so Enoch chapter 78, verse 14, it reads, "And when it is wholly extinguished, its light is consumed in heaven. And on the first day, it's called the new moon, for on that day, light is received into it." So on that day, light is received into the moon. Light coming from where? Light coming from the sun. It's now received into the moon, and that's when then you see that it's like as I said, it's like more like a banana shape, and like I said, also when you Google it, you'll be able to see how it looks like. That shape, as I said, my daughter calls it like a smiley face, but that's like a thin light that you see in the sky. That's when you now know that it is the beginning of the moon, as we are told from the book of Enoch chapter 78 verse 14, that the light is consumed in heaven, and on the first day it is called the new moon, for on that day light is received into it. Now, what does the scripture commands us to do? What does YaHuaH, because the scripture is YaHuaH's word, so it's YaHuaH's instructions and commands to us, just that it is written, not verbal. So what does YaHuaH commands us to do when it is the beginning of the moon? So yes, beginning of the moon or the beginning of the month. The book of Bamidbar, otherwise known as Numbers. So in the book of Numbers or Bamidbar, chapter 10 verse 10, Numbers chapter 10 verse 10, it says, "And in the day of your gladness, and in your appointed times, and at the beginning of your new moons, you shall blow the trumpet over your ascending offering and over your slaughtering of peace offering. And there shall be a remembrance for you before your AHaRaN. I am YaHuaH, your AHaRaN." So YaHuaH, our AHaRaN, is commanding us, as found in the book of Numbers chapter 10 verse 10, that at the beginning of the every moon, or at the beginning of every month, when it's basically day one of the month, when we see that sliver moon, we are to blow a trumpet over our ascending offering, over our slaughtering of peace, and that this becomes a remembrance for us before our AHaRaN, that he is YaHuaH, our AHaRaN. Another scriptural reference I always talk about, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. As to what are we supposed to do at the beginning of every month, or at the beginning of every moon, in the new moons, in the book of Tehillim, otherwise known as Psalms, Tehillim or Psalms, chapter 81, verse 3. So Psalms 81, verse 3, it says, "Blow the ram's horn at the time of your new month, at the full moon, and on our festival yom." So we are also told from, as we read in the book of Psalms, chapter 81, verse 3, that we are to blow the ram's horn. Other version says blow a trumpet at the one new moon, which is the day one of the month, when you see that sliver moon. And then we also are to blow a ram's horn on the full moon. And when it is a full moon, that's when it's literally like there's full lights on the moon. So it's full moon, which is on the 15th of every month. Remember, this is now, we're using YaHuaH's calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. So there will definitely be the 15th of the month on our Gregorian calendar will be different from YaHuaH's calendar. And that's why as YaSHaRAL, we need to know, I mentioned this before when we started this series, that even though we're in the world, we are not of the world. So we cannot only be knowing the times of the world or the seasons of the world in which we live in, but not know the times and the seasons of our own citizenship. And our citizenship is of the SHaMUT, or our citizenship is of the heavens where YaHuaH dwells. It's from, our citizenship is from we are of the kingdom of YaHuaH, not the kingdoms of this world. Hence, the time and the seasons are different. But this is what we're to do. So we blow the ram's horn. Other scriptures, as I said, so the other version says a trumpet. At the new moon, which is the first day of the month, we blow the trumpet. At the full moon, which is on the 15th of the month. And also, we also blow ram's horn or trumpet on our appointed times or the festivals. Now, continuing then with the understanding of the moon, that it has different shapes, and different shapes of the moon tells us what day of the month is at. When it is day 1, it is a sliver moon. And that shape of like a banana or smiley face or sliver shape, that tells us that it is day 1. So you start counting from there. And then when it is a full moon, then it is day 15th of the month. So let's just continue to see how we continue from day 1 to day 29. How do we count the days? So the book of Enoch, as we continue the book of Enoch, chapter 78, or CHaNuK, chapter 78, from verse 5 to 13, it says, Enoch 78 from verse 5 to 13. When the moon rises, it appears in heaven, and the half of the 7th portion of the light is all in it. In the 14th, the whole of its light is completed. 3 quintuples light is put into it. Quintuples basically means the sets of 5. So when it then says 3 quintuples, it means 3 times 5, because quintuples means sets of 5. So 5 times 3 is 15. So 3 quintuples, which is 15 lights is put into it. That's why then on the 15th day of the month, or the 15th day of the moon, that's when you have the full moon, and that's when it's actually the most brightest, most lightest day in the evening, because obviously the light is consumed fully on the moon, and that's why it becomes like a bright night when it is the full moon, or when it is the 15th of the month, which is very interesting that the children of YaSHaRAL left MaTSRaYM, or Egypt, on the 15th day of the first month, and that day had started on the evening of the 14th, which was the Passover. So it now it actually makes more sense that they were able to walk from Egypt, but it was not very dark, because that was the 15th of the month, when the light is much brighter, when the skies are much brighter, because the moon is full on that particular date. So then it continues to say that until the 15th, its light is completed. According to the signs of the year, it has 3 quintuples, as I said, 3 quintuples. Quintuples mean sets of 5. So 3 times 5, then it is 15. Now, when you then have so it basically it would have started on day one being sliver moon, and then it starts increasing. I've been observing this like every single month and taking the picture of it just for myself so that I can be able to say, okay, on the 7th day of the month, how does the shape of the moon look like? On the 8th day, on the 10th day, on the 15th day, on the 18th, on the 20th, on the 25th, every single day that you're able, because it changes shapes over the days. And then it would have then grown from the first day of the month or first day of the moon, second, third, fourth. So it's increasing as the light is being coming from the sun is being poured onto the moon. It increases up until it comes to the 15th. Then on the 15th you then have the full moon. Once you then have the full moon, then it starts decreasing. So then it will decrease from the 15, 14, 13, 12, so it becomes smaller from 15, and then which was full moon, then 14, then 13, then it becomes smaller and smaller until it vanishes or until it disappears, and then it will then come again in the new month, and then we see that light, sliver moonlight again, and then it starts building up and increase from first, second, third, fourth, fifth, up until the 15th. So that is explained in Enoch chapter 78 from verse 5 to 13, which then says that the moon has half of the 7th portion during its diminution. That is now after the 15th day, it's now reducing, as it says it is during its diminution. On the first day, its light decreases a 14th part. Remember when it was from the first day of the month, it was increasing to the 15th part, or 15th day, and it is now decreasing. So the light decreases a 14th part. On the second day, it decreases to a 13th part. The third day decreases to the 12th. The fourth, it decreases to the 11th. The fifth, it decreases to the 10th. On the 6th day, it 9th part, and then on the 7th day, it decreases to the 8th part. On the 8th, it decreases to the 5th part. On the 11th, it decreases to the 4th part. On the 12th day, it decreases to the 7th part. On the 15th day, the whole remainder of its light is now consumed. You can, as I said, read this for yourself in Enoch, the book of Enoch, chapter 78, from verse 5 to 13, but basically it's from increasing from day 1 to 15, and then it starts reducing again. The same moon, you just like go up and then it didn't go down after 15 days. On stated months, the moon has 29 days and once 28 days. YaHuaH likewise showed me another regulation when light is poured into the moon, how it is poured into from the sun. All the time that the moon is in progress with its light, it is poured in the presence of the sun until light is in 14 days completed in heaven. That is the progression and how the processes of the moon works. It's different though from the sun, because the sun, whether sunrise on day 1, it looks the same as sunrise on day 2 and the sunrise on day 3. Even sundown, when sundown on day 1, on day 2, on day 3, on day 4 of the month, it looks the same. And this now makes sense why YaHuaH uses the moon for times, because you wouldn't be able to say it's the first day of the month based on the sun, because it's the sun has the same shape, meaning same shape in terms of sunrise or sunset or sundown, regardless of which day. So you won't be able to know, am I on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. It's only the moon that changes the shape, and the change of the shape informs us what day of the month is. But we don't get that. We can't understand it. We can't know what day it is from the sun, because the sun has the same shape throughout the month. So now, in starting this teaching, I said, what is it that marks the beginning of the new moons, what marks the beginning of the months. We've gone through that. So then the next part that we're now looking at is that, so what marks the beginning of the year? Which of the lights marks the beginning of the year? Because the moon marks the beginning of the months, or the beginning of the moons. Because remember, when YaHuaH spoke to YaSHaRAL when they were leaving MaTSRaYM, which is found in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1 to 2, as well as Exodus 13, verse 4, he said, this month marks the beginning of new months for you. And so let me just quickly read that just as a reminder, if I can just quickly find it. But it specifically said that this month, today marks the beginning of new months for you. All right, but okay, I didn't write it down here on my notes, but you can, as I said, you can find it in the book of Exodus chapter 12, verse, oh yeah, there is it, Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. It says, and YaHuaH spoke to MaSHaH and AHaRaN in the land of MaTSRaYM, saying, this new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. Beginning of new moons. YaHuaH knew what you said. He could have just said the beginning of the year for you. He specifically said it's the beginning of the new moons, because there's a difference between the beginning of the new moons or months and the beginning of the year. The beginning of the year is marked by the sun, whereas the beginning of the new moons is marked by the moon. And that's what it says. And then it says, it is the first new moon of the year for you. It's the first moon of the year, but it's not the beginning of the year for you. It's the first moon of the year. And as I said, in the next teaching, we'll be then looking at what happens when the beginning of the new moons is at different time as the beginning of the new year. Because it does happen that the beginning of the new moons happens before, even a month before the beginning of the year. So how do you align the two? And that's when he then says in Exodus chapter 13, verse 4, today you are going out in the new moon being Abib, which you spoke about in the previous teaching, that it is barley that is Abib, or Abib basically means ripe for harvest, or ready for harvesting. Now, what marks the beginning of the year? The beginning of the year is marked by the sun. And if we read this information, you can even find on Google. I actually found this on Google. It says, the spring equinox in the southern hemisphere, also known as the vernal equinox for that hemisphere, occurs around September or 23. September 22 or 23. So we are told, hence I spoke about the importance of knowing the land. Even not only the crops are harvested different seasons between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Barley is Abib or ready for harvest in the southern hemisphere around September, October. But barley is Abib or ready for harvest around March, April in the northern hemisphere. So it matters where the land is, because you have to, we are instructed in Exodus 13 verse 5 that we are to observe the appointed times of YaHuaH according to the promised land, as our forefathers left MaTSRaYM or Egypt and they went into the promised land. Same also with regard to spring equinox, or the sun passes through the equator. It happens at different times between the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, the spring equinox happens around September 22 or 23, marking the astronomical beginning of the spring and the point when the sun crosses the equator. This day is characterized by nearly equal amounts of daylight and darkness, and the sun rises in the east and setting in the west everywhere on the earth. Here are the key facts with regards to spring equinox. 1, as far as the dates are concerned, here are the facts. The exact date varies slightly each year, but it follows on September 22 or 23 in the southern hemisphere. So it will happen around the same time every year, the spring equinox. Meanwhile, in the northern hemisphere, this time spring equinox will be happening around March, April. So what is the astronomical significance of spring equinox? And this information, as I said, you can also Google it. I found it on Google. The astronomical significance of spring equinox is that it's the moment the sun crosses the celestial equator, which also marks the start of spring. It signifies the start of spring in the southern hemisphere. Hence, it is spring equinox. And those who are in the southern hemisphere, they would know that spring starts in September in the southern hemisphere. I'm from South Africa. I live in South Africa, born and bred in South Africa, and spring is in September. Obviously, South Africa is within the southern hemisphere. As far as daylight and darkness is concerned, I mentioned that it is around the equinox that there are nearly equal amounts of daylight and darkness. Sun's position, these are the facts that are provided also, as I said, on Google. On this day, the sun rises due to the exact east and sets due to the exact west everywhere on earth, opposite of the northern hemisphere. As I said, that in the northern hemisphere this happens around March, April. So what is this thing of the spring equinox from the scriptural reference? We just read it from Google, or the facts that is available in terms of the nature. But what does the scripture say? So when we read the book, we find the movement then of the sun in marking the spring equinox. We find this in the book of CHaNuK or ENOCH chapter 72 verse 9 to 11. It's very sad that the people that removed the book of ENOCH, because it was originally there, the people that removed the book of ENOCH from the scriptures, they really did very great harm, because this is the only person, ENOCH, whom YaHuaH revealed all the movements of this of the lights which he created, the movement of the moon in quite detail. There's no other book in the scriptures that is explaining the movement of the moon as was written in the book of Enoch, as was written by Enoch. No scripture explains the movement of the sun, or rather there's no book other than the book of Enoch that explains the movement of the sun and as well as the stars, because as I quoted in the previous chapter, which was Enoch 78, where it was Uriel, one of YaHuaH's malak, that was summoned by YaHuaH to reveal all these mysteries concerning the celestial or astronomical or the lights, the sun, the moon, the stars that YaHuaH created. It was for our benefit, not for us to worship them, not for us to serve them, but they serve us as the people of YaHuaH. And then, as I said, then CHaNuK or Enoch chapter 72 verse 9 to 11, it reads, "In the same manner it goes forth in the first month by the great gate." This is now the sun going through, because it goes through 6 different portals. By the great gate, it goes through the fourth of those 6 gates, which are at the rising of the sun. And in the fourth gate from which the sun rises in the first month, there are 12 open windows, from which issues out a flame when they are opened in their proper periods. Now, again, yes, you don't have the book of Enoch in our Bibles because it was removed, but you can actually go go on internet and just Google the book of Enoch, chapter 72, verse 9 to 11, you're going to be able to see what I've just read. And then if you go on Google or any search for that matter, I know I refer a lot to Google, but the search engines, they're more than Google. And just go to images, click spring equinox, and then click images. You'll be able to see the shape or this image that you can be able to see then the sun moving from the 6th gate to the 4th gate, which then makes the spring equinox. That's when it is then the sun is on the 4th gate. That's when the spring equinox happen. That then marks the beginning of the year. And then, as we have just read now, that in the southern hemisphere it happens more or less at the same time. It will be September, either the 22nd or the 23rd. By what is out there right now, it shows that it will be on the 23rd of September. That will be the beginning of the year for us in the southern hemisphere. And then so that's where we're going to end in today's teaching regarding the comparison between what marks the new year and what marks the new moons or new months. And then in the next teaching, I will then be going through the differences, the alignment that happens, because a lot of people, I know they're going to say, but the moon has 10 days in a year. The moon has 354 days, whereas the sun has 364 days. So the moon has 10 days short of them compared to the sun. The sun has, if you're looking at the days according to the sun, you're going to come to 364 days. If you look at the days according to the moon, you're going to come to 354 days. 10 days, the moon has 10 days short per year. So how do you align the two? Because ultimately we have to be having 364 days, or in the space of 3 years, you must be having 1,092 days. That's what we're going to be then looking at. How do you reconcile the two from the scriptural point of view, not from what other people are saying, which you don't even understand the formula of what they use. We will stop there, and then we'll then, in the next teaching, as I said, we'll be looking at then reconciling the number of days between the movement of the moon per year and the movement of the sun per year. Shalom.